That's right. Evolution and natural selection. That's the next set of lectures from BM 108. You see it? That's the slide deck that's on my place. So here are the learning outcomes. So like I said before, the learning outcomes are very important because it enables you to focus in on what areas of the class that will be examined effectively. So by the end of the lectures, you should be able to see the progression of life over geological time, with a long, long time, including some very important steps. So the important steps are the ones that are likely to be examined, and understand the principles of evolution and how they're linked with life, understand the mechanisms as defined by Darwin and others, so that would be Charles Darwin. So we're going to look at the progression of life, understand the principles of evolution and some of the mechanisms that define how evolution occurred. So where are we on the journey through the history of life? So basically, we started off as simple unicellular life, so prokaryotes, and this thing, archaea. So they're basically bacteria, and archaea are basically bacterial-like, but their genetic lineage is actually different from bacteria. So that's why they're a separate life form. So we're eukaryotic, and mammalian cells are eukaryotes, so prokaryotes are bacteria. And the next step is to make eukaryotes, and then from simple single mammalian cells, they then form multicellular organisms and eventually higher animals and human beings, etc. So I think we have done this thing before with some of Paul Coates' early lectures. This thing called endosymbiosis, and what's the evidence for endosymbiosis, and there's this lineage of early life. It's called the Asgard superphylum, and if they are the kind of early life form that actually goes on to make this eukaryotic Asgard common ancestor. And so we've got a number of different Asgardian lines of organisms. They're all named after they look a little bit like Marvel myths, where we've got Loki and we've got Thor, Odin, and I can't remember this one, what this Heimdall is, but they are basically the old Norse gods. That's what they're named after. We're not expecting you to remember all these names. There it is. So, and also we've got this alpha proteobacteria, which is like the early bacteria, and the very, very common bacteria. So they're called Wolbachia, so the common parasitic mutualistic bacteria. And the thought is that the eukaryotic cells and this eukaryotic alpha protobacterium, they eventually merge together because if they can form a symbiotic relationship. So this part here, if you look at this illustration, they're just sharing the same space, and not actually they're not together. And in this illustration here, it shows you that eventually these two different cells or two different life forms actually merge together to form this almost like a coalition, where we have the eukaryotic cells and we have the mitochondria living together within the actual same cellular environment. And so these the Asgardian Archaeota have many genes which were previously thought to be eukaryotic specific. So what that really means is that eukaryotic cells and this Asgardian cell, Asgardian protocell, share genes which are both have in common, and that links the mammalian cells or eukaryotic cells and that primitive cell as having a common origin. So this family of cells, actually they've been cultured in labs in Japan, probably other places as well. They are an anaerobic species, so they effectively only live in the absence of oxygen. So oxygen is usually lethal to them, and hence they're found in this deep sea sediment, very deep down in ocean beds, and they metabolically speaking, they are not very active, and so this cell divides every 20 days. And for example, E. coli, Escherichia coli, that divides every 30 minutes. So that E. coli is a aerobic bacteria. So that, and the anaerobic bacteria are metabolically very, very, very slow. And so the whole study to study this particular organism took 12 years because it took a long time for enough cells to actually grow and divide. The illustrations here and here and here, they are just for you to look at. No one's ever going to ask you to draw what these organisms look like. Okay. So the next one, and this is just a timeline associated with the appearance of various organisms, how the people think the various organisms appear, and so I'm not doing Edicaria biota. It's a difficult one to pronounce, but never mind about it. So that started 6 million years ago. So YA stands for years ago. Okay, years ago. It's an unconventional abbreviation for years ago. So don't write it. If you're going to write something, always write it in full, 600 or years ago. 600. So that's the first multicellular organisms, and they're the metazoans. So remember that the first multicellular organisms, they're the metazoans, and they appeared about 600 million years ago. And so their appearance, they're bag-like. So bag-like is just like something you carry, like a handbag or a supermarket bag. So it's a bag. The bag is actually made of lipid bilayer, no doubt. You can see it's got discs. There are discs shapes in it. They're mats. And this Scottish geologist is called Alexander Murray. He was the first to describe them. And but now they're named after the location of the best deposits, and that's in Australia. So you can remember that Alexander Murray, a Scottish geologist, he was the first person to describe these first multicellular organisms, the metazoans that occurred on the planet 600 million years ago. So there's also this thing called a Cambrian explosion. So that was 540 million years ago. So hundreds of species in the world suddenly went up to millions of species. So an explosion of life, effectively, a massive increase in the number and variety of animals over a very short period of time. And when we talk about period of time, talk about a very short geological period of time. So still over a number of millions of years. And they reckon the reason for that is that there was a sudden increase in the oxygen concentration in the atmosphere, probably due to many more photosynthetic plants generating oxygen, and that made increase the availability of different types of food substances. So predation was then feasible because animals could then move around, and because there was more and more prey, more and more predation, more and more eating of other things, the other animals that were being eaten actually had to respond to that. So the prey also had to respond. So there was this sudden increase in variety of animals and plants at that time. And at that time as well, calcium concentrations increased. The availability of calcium increased across the planet, and that meant that shells, which are made up of calcium, and skeletons, or endoskeletons and exoskeletons, they could then be formed. And this part here, okay, that just means actually that spelling is wrong. I've just noticed it. That should be just. See that? Can you see that spelling's wrong? It says it looks like it's juts. Okay, it's actually just. J-U-S-T. J-U-S-T. This thing is annoying me. J-U-S-T, or just an artifact of good preservation of fossils and rocks. What that means is that the reason we know all these different things occurred is only because we've got evidence of these animals and biology that are preserved in rocks as part of our geological history. If they're not preserved in rocks, then we won't know that anything like that existed. So really, although the rocks acts as our rocks acts a little bit like a library of information. But if people don't write anything down, then nothing is preserved. So it kind of biases in some respects what we actually know about the history of life in the past. So this slide here is just for your interest. It just shows you all the weird and wonderful types of animals that were thought to have. Oh no, there's geological evidence and fossil records to describe what they look like. We don't know what the colours look like. We don't know what the soft tissue looks like. It's just those elements that have been preserved as fossils. So you don't have to remember anything here. And in different parts of the world, and the example here, Burgess Shale, and that's in Canada, a Canadian fossil deposits, so mostly coal, and that'll be the case in China as well. There are lots and lots of evidence of different types of animals that have been found in these shale deposits. You don't have to know any of these. It's just showing you the different examples of them. And of course, what this is an example of, we call it hallucigenia. What this is supposed to represent is that we have this fossil record, which is this guy here, and we have our imaginative form of what we think this fossil record would look like if it was an animal. But of course, we don't really know if this is the top or the bottom of the animal. We don't really know if that's the front of the back of the animal, or that's the back of the animal. We're just making a guess based on what we think is the correct way around. We also don't know if it was coloured in any way whatsoever, and what these colours actually, if these colours are just an artist's rendition. So this slide here, you don't memorise it. It's just a case of, this is just an unusual thing. So let's look at the origin and history of life. It has a number of key features. So you need to remember these features, okay? So the important thing is there are changes, and the changes there's progression in the changes. Complexity increases over time. So we went from very simple bacteria, simple unicellular organism, to very complex organisms over time. And the diversity increases over time. So we've got a huge range of different animals and plants on the planet just now. Life strategies are reflected in kingdoms. So the kingdoms are really the kind of super families associated with the different animals. So life strategies means that some animals will adopt a particular approach to life. So, for example, lions will eat zebras, but zebras eat grass. So they've got different lifestyle, and the DNA and the various genomes they have a number of common features that correlates with apparent relatedness. So what it's saying here is that if you look at the DNA of a lion and you look at our DNA, you'll actually find some bits of DNA that are almost the same, because some of the elements in the lion's DNA is actually preserved in our DNA. So some ion channels and some receptors that are almost identical. So there's some similarity, not huge amounts of it, because a lion's a lion and humans are humans. So what are the rules driving all of above? So nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So effectively, what the science is saying is that animals have evolved from very simple animals. And this is this essay by this guy here. You don't have to look at the essay. Just know that it's evolution is important. And evolution explains the diversity of life. Evolution explains the diversity of life. So organisms are very diverse, from bacteria, which are prokaryotes, to animals via single-celled or very simple eukaryotes, fungi, plants, etc. And what he's saying here, what about viruses? And don't worry about that, because viruses are completely different, because some only have DNA, some only have RNA. They may have evolved from, they may just be packets of information that have evolved a way to replicate for no real purpose. It's just a throwback of some ancient pieces of DNA and RNA. So where does this diversity come from? And most biologists argue that the species living today originate from simpler organisms that existed either millions or billions of years ago. So we have things have evolved over time. Sometimes people have a hard time thinking of how animals can possibly evolve. But one great example of almost, it's almost like it's like human beings driving evolution. You just have to look at dogs, and if you think of a dog, the dog family, you can see that some dogs are like Chihuahuas and Pekingese. Then maybe they're almost the size of your hand. And you've got other dogs like Mastiffs and Great Danes, and they go from tiny animals to animals that are almost as big as a small horse. So that's human beings driving the evolution of dogs, and so just like an example. Now, evolution explains the relatedness of life. So what that means is that evolution explains that if you go back far enough in time, we can actually see that we have some common ancestors. We live in a snapshot of geological time, but it's hard to see what happened over millions of years. Yet different organisms look similar or share similar features. So if you think about it, different organisms look similar, vaguely speaking. So higher animals have eyes. We all, dogs, cats, birds, they have eyes. So they've evolved. That common trait is carried through all these different species. For example, in DNA sequence evidence confirms this relatedness. So if you look at the DNA of various animals, you can see that we share some common features. And this relatedness is the basis of taxonomy. So you remember that. So taxonomy is a scientific term to try to understand how different animals are related to each other. So it's this part here, this description here shows you the different ways in which people have tried to classify the different living things. So we have a kingdom, we have a phylum, we have a class, we have an order, we have a family, we have a genus, and we have a species. So that's a rank order, going from very large numbers down to very, very small numbers, and hopefully the next one. So evolution explains the complexity of living organisms. So we share the world with simple viruses, which are little more than DNA and RNA wrapped up in some proteins. So you can say they're the most primitive form of potential life, because they just replicate their DNA and their RNA and some proteins, but the viruses don't make ATP, they don't synthesize anything, they don't use carbohydrates, they don't do anything like that. The only role that a virus, RNA and DNA viruses have, is to basically replicate the DNA. And another thing, the spectrum, as far as we know, the human, so a very simple organism, and then we go to the other extreme. As far as we know, the human brain is the most complex structure in the universe. And he's put ... here because it's a bit of an exaggeration to suggest that, because we don't know what's happening with the rest of the universe, we're just assuming that. But some people have tried to work out how many neurons, how many connections do we have in our brains, and they reckon that there are more interconnections within the different nerves in our brain than there are stars in the sky. So huge numbers, trillions of them. But the same biological principles operate across this spectrum, and they're being driven by evolution. So what this is saying is that any changes in us as human beings, any changes in viruses are driven by the same types of pressures. Now, so diversity and the durability of life. So what they're saying is that there are we've got very diverse number of animals and plants and bacteria and viruses across the planet, and some of them are able to survive a number of very, very difficult places to live. And so these are just a few examples of them. Single-celled organisms. This is called a water bear. And the funny thing about the water bear is that it's the first animal that's actually, if you expose it to took it into space, expose it to the vacuum of space, so completely dried out. Most other animals would never survive that. They brought it back to Earth, they rehydrated it, and then came back to life again. So there are lots of different places in which animals and plants have survived. Just if you're interested in, just click on it. We'll never ask you any details about each of them. So So evolution explains how life can change over time and hence give rise to diversity, relatedness, and the complexity of animals. So how species change and adapt to the altered environments. How do they do that? So look at how species emerge, and look at how some species cannot adapt. And if they can't adapt to the changes, to the surroundings, then that might lead to the animal actually becoming extinct. So an example here are, for example, dinosaurs. So during the extinction of the dinosaurs, apparently there was a large meteor. It crash landed on Earth, then covered the planet in ash. It basically wiped out all the plant-based animals, which then meant that the large carnivorous animals they then died out as a consequence as well. So this thing called a mass extinction. But a number of animals managed to survive that and exploit this new environment as a result of the lack of these other large dinosaurs. So this very complex looking thing. So what it's really trying to say is that evolution, life on the Earth is one big extended family. So we would never ask you about this whole detail, but what they're really saying is that the birth of life starts about here, and then we have all the life coming from a common origin, and then effectively resulting in mammals, and you can see man as well at the very top of this tree. There are different lines here where people recognise where there have been a number of mass extinctions, and hence we only really see the tips of the trees rather than the whole tree, because over geological time, many different animals have basically died out due to changes in the environment. So look at that one here. So it's just showing you the parts of this network that you might recognise. So it's a tree of life. So we all share a common evolutionary history, and there are some things. If you open up some of these links, you'll be able to see. Hopefully, you'll get some interesting links. So evolutionary discovery, just a short history of it. So basically, it starts off with the origin, the history of evolution. The theory starts with Darwin's origin of species. Although Darwin was a very clever man, he was born in the 19th century, in the 1800s. He was born in Shrewsbury. He was he's son of a doctor, and he came to Edinburgh, so he's got a Scottish heritage. He went 16 to study medicine, and he preferred to study nature, and he studied Leith is a small town near Edinburgh, and he studied mussels. So mussels are just like it's a shell-based sea life, and he was looking at and studying mussels. And he went to Cambridge, and he became a clergyman. So he became quite religious, and he then travelled to the Galapagos Islands, and this ship called HMS Beagle when he was 22, and he spent a lot of time observing plants and animals during a 5-year voyage. So he wasn't the only person who was interested in how animals evolve, because the dogma before that was basically a religious dogma, which basically said that everybody, the planet Earth was made in 7 days, or the Christian dogma is that, and all the fossils were actually put there by a higher being, and man didn't evolve. Man was basically created, and this is why the origin of the species was not unanimously welcomed by the Victorians. really because they misunderstood the origin of the species. They think, and a lot of people still do think, that humans have evolved from apes, from gorillas, etc. But we haven't evolved from them. We share a common ancestor, but that doesn't mean that we evolved from them. So this is where the confusion arises. So humans are not descended from modern apes. We share a common but extinct ancestor. So this slide here actually should be the other way around. So this is the common ancestor. It's going here. And then we have this divergence. So this common ancestor is directly related to A, but the common ancestor then splits again to form B, but then we have another split and we form C and D. So A, B, C, and D are only indirectly related to each other through this point here. So that's not the same as A becoming B, becoming C, becoming D. So it's not a linear progression. It's a diversion. It's a diverse change, a diverting change. So the next slide. So this is just to help you with this part here. So we construct the taxonomy of apes using this type of diagram. It's still a tree. This is called a tree. And here we have another tree showing you the different types of, the names of the different animals that would actually account for the human beings. So the superfamily, family, subfamily, tribe, and genus. So if you take hominy, so we can see that we have Hominodea has a lineage split into two different families, and then there's two different subfamilies, and there's two tribes. So the two tribes were Hominy and the Gorillae, and the genus is man. And I think I'm not too sure what that is. To be honest with you, but never mind. And gorilla. So humans and gorillas are not directly related to each other, but we share a lot of common traits simply because we share a common ancestor in the past. So we share, and that underscores what we see as far as the genome of these different animals. So this is a current-ish, but that means it's not quite, never a complete attempt to piece together the evolution of Homo sapiens. And it's so here we have Homo sapiens up here. So present. So that means 1 million years ago, 2 million years ago, 3 million years ago, 4, 5, 6 million years ago. So this is trying to draw this tree to try to understand how modern day humans evolved, and trying to find these links between each one of us. And so we would never ask you to memorize this tree. Don't think about it. But the take-home message from this tree is that modern day humans have a common ancestor, which they are still don't know about. So if you track this one back, you can see it goes back to here. This Homo ergaster, and then it stops because we don't know where this link is here. There's still some missing pieces that might be found as things go on. Yep. Let me just see. Somebody just raised a hand. Let me just stop the class just a second. I don't know how to stop the class. Oh yeah, stop share. Stop the share. Somebody raised their hand. Who raised their hand again? Wanted to ask my question. Or are we just pressing buttons? Does someone want something? Hello?
Hello.
Did you want to ask me something? Did you want to ask something? No? Are we all okay? Is everyone okay? It's hard to tell. Okay, that's good. Let me just carry on then. Share the screen with my PowerPoint presentation. Oh dear, where was I? I've lost my space. Yes, just here. So, like I said, we're not asking you to memorize any of this information just so that it's just to make you aware of where we stand, where the science stands in terms of trying to understand how human beings evolved. So we don't have enough information to actually pin it right down. So there's another. So like I said earlier, said to you that there were lots and lots of people trying to understand evolution, and we only know a few of them because they were the ones who wrote books rather than actually just talked about it. So there probably people in India and people in China at the time who were thinking of how things actually became different and as things moved on. So although these are the people that we know of, there are lots of other people. So there's this guy called Alfred Russel Wallace, and he's another 19th century naturalist, and he explored Malaysia in the 1855, and there's this thing called a Wallace line, and what he appreciated was that the geographical locations can generate diversity in animals. So, and sometimes we see that in, if you look at animals that live in the lowlands are actually different from animals that live in the highlands. And that the geographical location is driving some change within the animals. So what's the theory of evolution? This is what we think. So there's this thing, so genetic diversity. So although Darwin didn't know what we know about genes and mutations, but now we know that it's actually the main driver for evolution is selection pressure and genetic inbuilt genetic diversity. And he may not have understood about genes and mutations, but he understood that subtle differences in appearance between individuals in a population could be acted upon by natural selection. And now we know that we have random mutations occurring in the DNA of every single organism, and some of that is because of errors in how the DNA is replicated, and some of that is because damage to DNA due to UV light or chemicals, they cause these random mutations. Some of these random mutations will have a disadvantage to the animal. So a random mutation that causes a cancer is a disadvantage, and it's not likely to be selected for. But a random mutation that protected you against cancer would actually be of some benefit. So what we're saying here, so the whole population, if you take animals, becomes a gene pool full of what's called heritable variation. So that's because our genes are passed down to our offspring, if we have any, and that variation will be reflected in the outcome of the offspring. And you can see that there are subtle differences. So if you look at your own families at home, you might look more like your mum or your dad, or you might look more like your grandparents, or even your great-grandparents, in fact. because some family traits, some of them are shown directly by how you look, but you also might carry some other genetic some genetic traits as well, which some of your family members might recognise as well. Some of you might be taller, some of you might be smaller, that sort of thing, because that's all down to what genetic material that you actually retain, and this variation is the fuel for evolution. In human beings, it's quite hard to actually see evolution in practice, but in other animals, it is much easier. So selection, this thing called selection pressure, and so selection pressure is effectively the struggle for existence. So the struggle to stay alive is selection pressure. So population size is kept in check. What check means that the population is prevented from outgrowing its space by would actually use all the natural resources. So that would actually mean that the population size would be kept in check, and like I said, due to competition for resources such as food, even within the same species, the predation perhaps might increase. Disease might actually affect the population size. Adverse environmental changes, so such as temperature and oxygen levels. So people think that in the past, big changes in oxygen, big changes in temperature would have either a positive or a negative effect on various animals, and also competition for a mate. Because some people think that it's the female of the species that actually drives some changes in evolution, because the selection pressure by the female will actually then have an influence the offspring. So in some animals, some birds, for example, they're selecting for larger and larger feathers. So only males that have larger and larger feathers get a chance to mate, and their offspring will also have larger and larger feathers. So it's effectively the survival of the fittest. So you should remember this. So evolution is effectively the survival of the fittest. So the theory, survival of the fittest, the genetic difference between individuals ensures some are better able to cope with a selection pressure in the environment than others. And because we're all slightly different as human beings and animals, and also the very basic organisms, the DNA might be 99.9% very similar. It's that 0.1% that actually allows for evolution to act upon these different organisms, because it might confer an advantage, because they survive and thrive better, and therefore they produce more offspring. And the important thing is the offspring contains the advantage trait or the advantage mutation, and because of that, that offspring will therefore, that genetic change becomes more frequent in the population over many generations. So if it's an advantage to have a particular phenotype, a particular look, if suddenly the planet got very cold, and then animals that could survive colder climates would have an advantage, and all those animals that could produce more hair would have an advantage. So therefore, so over time, the animals would be hairier and more likely to survive the kind of cold climate. So you can just think any selection pressure will drive these changes, and that's why when you look at the planet Earth, you'll see that there are particular animals that survive the cold and hot and they'll look completely different because the character traits associated with those two different extremes is actually quite different. So the evolution, in terms of mechanism, is based on, it's a molecular mechanism. So remember this. So it's a random genotypic mutation causing a beneficial phenotype. Okay? So the genotype is your genetic makeup, and the phenotype is what is seen as a consequence of that. And so a genotype mutation, if that genotype confers an advantage, then there'll be a beneficial phenotype, and that means that organism will be able to grow and thrive. So in the face of a selection pressure, causing increased production of offspring who also inherit the genotype. So the important thing is there must be offspring. If there's no inheritance, and then that phenotype will actually won't be carried through in terms of evolution. So mutation and its phenotype increases in a population. The organism has adapted and changed in a small way to take advantage of the different living conditions. And just remember that producing more offspring is a vital step. And in some animals, this is a slow process. So in human beings, it's maybe every 16 years. 16 years to get to become sexually mature, and there's a 16-year lag period before human beings can reproduce. And if you were an elephant, it would be 20 odd months. But if you're a bacteria, it's only every 30 minutes. So bacteria have a huge ability to change to their environment. So this is an example here. It's just to help you understand. Here's the parent, and the parent produces some offspring, but the offspring are not identical to each other. So if you've got brothers or sisters, you just have to look at them, and they're not identical to you. They've got different character traits associated with each other, and so that mutation takes variation. So if you think about bacteria, which is a better maybe a better example, it's less brutal. And if there's a selection pressure, then the one that carries an unfavorable mutation will then die out, and the other two, which have got slightly better mutations, they then survive. Because they survive, they're able to reproduce, we see here, but we still get some mutations in amongst them. So that's why the colours are slightly different. So reproduction and further mutation occurs, and there might be other selection pressures that results in these offspring here just dying out, but the selection pressure is such that these guys here are able to survive, so they continue to survive. And so effectively, the genetic material associated with these unfavorable mutations then dies out, and we have the genetic material associated with favorable mutations actually surviving. And we can see that with bacteria. Like I said, bacteria are a much better example. And we've got this thing called methicillin. Methicillin is an antibiotic. You don't have to worry about it. Methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So it's a bacterial infection. It's sometimes abbreviated to MRSA, methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, MRSA. And across the planet where we use antibiotics, we have bacterial. So we have many bacterial infections in hospitals, especially after surgery, and what people have noticed. When you say recently, it really is in the last 20 or 30 years. People have become. People are no longer responding to antibiotics, so their infection is no longer being. The bacterial infection is no longer going away, as a consequence of them being given antibiotics. So the bacteria become antibiotic resistance. And that's the reason for that is we call it down to excessive. What it really means is due to excessive prescription, excessive use of antibiotics, actually since probably the 1940s. We say World War II, but we really mean the 1940s. And so the antibiotics acts as a selection pressure, and then we have bacteria surviving that, and therefore having a genotype that actually means they are able to resist the effects of the antibiotic. So survival of the fittest, okay? SOT, survival of the fittest. So the fittest, the bacteria are able to survive the antibiotics. They transfer their genetic material down the line, and then we have bacteria that are completely resistant to the antibiotic. So the selection pressure for antibiotics. So before, this is just trying to demonstrate how this selection pressure occurs. So at the bottom, in yellow, it's called resistance level. So in yellow, the bacteria are not resistant to the antibiotic, but in red, they're highly resistant to antibiotic. So before the antibiotic was introduced, see if we could go back in time to the 1800s, and we took a sample of Staph aureus, what we would see is that the bacteria genome actually would be very, very variable, quite variable enough, so that the genetic variability within that is what's causing or driving the change in population of antibiotics, change and making antibiotic resistance. So when we introduce the antibiotic, that kills off the bacteria that have got low resistance, so the ones in yellow, and only the ones in red survive. They're part of the global population. And then we have a final population that's actually got a very high resistance to antibiotics. And so in the presence of antibiotics, we effectively select for only those organisms that are able to resist the antibiotics. So it's not a good thing. This slide here is really quite weird, actually, quite complicated. And it's like a normal distribution. So over time, and what it's really doing is that we have the curve here becoming much narrower. So that's what's happening, and what that's trying to represent is that the selection pressure can basically reduce the variation within a particular population. And what he's got here, think of a baby's head and its size, and most babies have the same shape or same size of head, and that really that's the brain is actually just driven by the evolution to become more intelligent. The size of the head is affected down to basically the size of the cervix of the female. But selection pressure can cause a number. What he's trying to say here, selection pressure can cause different outcomes. So it can be stabilizing, so making things very similar. It can be destructive and actually making things quite different, or it can be directional, push it in one way or the other. So I think stabilizing is a little bit like how we look. So your family members all look quite similar, and so that's a kind of stabilizing selection pressure. And disruptive, what's happening here is that what it's trying to demonstrate is that in some animals, what we have some bats that are only come out at night, and some bats that come out during the day, and so the selection pressure effect has for the same kind of the same species or the same animal that we have nocturnal and daytime bats, or we have directional. So this is the antibiotic resistance. So what it's doing is showing that eventually we select for antibiotic resistant bacteria. So summary: evolution is a set of established ideas, and those ideas are still being discussed and debated and amongst the different scientific communities and other groups of people as well who look at the evidence and think that other things are going on. So it's a set of established ideas that can be neatly combined with our modern understanding of genetics to explain everything about the biological world we live in and came before us. So what this is trying to say is that now we understand how inheritance occurs. We understand our DNA and our genome and how that reflects our phenotype. We can now use that information to have a better understanding of how evolution occurred, and why some animals survive and some animals don't survive based on selection pressure, i.e. survival of the fittest. And there's a wee question here: does it tell us or you anything about the future of life on Earth? And because you could say that just now the diversity on Earth is actually being diminished by how man has influenced the kind of the environments that we live in. So we all live in cities. Many of us live in big cities, which are basically concrete and brick, and so we don't really see much diversity within cities. So really, the cities are actually potentially reducing the diversity within some animals, and because of that, because of the selection pressure and just the negative selection pressure induced by cities, some animals can't thrive in these cities, and therefore their numbers are diminishing and potentially dying out. But other animals are taking advantage of the cities. So rats and mice, for example, huge numbers of rats and mice in cities because they have the ability to take advantage of that change. And so the next time, the next lecture we'll look at the evidence for evolution and how we humans can also be a selective pressure. So that's really what I'm trying to say to you. So human beings can select for various things depending on how we behave. Okay, so that's evolution, or that's the slide number, or lecture number 2. So remember, when you're looking at these slides, make sure you refer back to the learning outcomes. Don't be overwhelmed with the huge amount of information or not expecting you